So I'd like to welcome Dorte Evelyn to our Belly Dance networking event, and she's going to talk to us about, we've called it 5 admin essentials. Over to you, Dorte.
Thank you very much. So I know a lot of you, and it's so lovely to see so many familiar faces. So I will introduce myself, however, because I do not know all of you yet. So I am Dorte Evelyn. I'm what I like to call a multi-passionate entrepreneur. Most of you will know me as a teacher and a performer. I run my own school of belly dance, the Ishta Dance Academy. And I'm also heavily involved with JWAAD, which I'm very, very proud of. And I teach on the safety course, where I've seen quite a few of you. So it's a bit like a reunion for me, which is lovely. I teach the marketing and the administration on there. I also share, obviously, my own experiences, but this is slightly different. Also, I am a marketing and brand consultant, and I help entrepreneurs and charities make most use of their resources for maximum effect. And then I also started my own business as a self-development coach, where I use Nordic and sustainability living principles in order for people to have a bit more, how should I say, happiness, health, and focus in their life. So I'm quite busy also because I've got a 6-year-old boy. He was here earlier, by the way, but he got a bit bored, so he had to walk. He kind of wanted to say hello to everyone. He likes to do that. He's done that ever since I started Zoom classes, which is quite funny. Um, so yeah, so I have to be quite organized with my time. So some of the tools and tips I'm sharing with you today are things that I use or have used, or tips that I share with others through the work that I'm doing. So I've broken it down as structure, time blocking, prioritization, streamlining, and automation. And obviously all of it could come under the headline of structure, because a lot of it has to do with structure. And when it comes to that, it's very important, I think, to say that one structure does not fit all. We're all individuals. We've got different ways of doing things. So you might have read a lot of suggestions and tips, and you can't make them work. And possibly it's because it just does not kind of work your way of organizing and thinking and doing things. I, for example, I get very, very easily distracted, and I don't know if that's a belly dancer thing, but I have like this shiny object syndrome, and I go, "Oh, okay, all right, so I'm going to go over here." And, "Oh, okay." I have also started referring to it as a squirrel brain, because it's a bit like, I'm doing the things like, "Oh, okay, all right, look at this thing over here," and I get completely sidetracked. So it took me a long time, but basically what I gave up on using, I used to use lots of post-its, and I still have a love for post-its, but if I now don't enter everything into my phone, then I do know that I don't make the most use of my time. So it also means that I save a lot of trees, and my desk is a little bit more tidy. But basically, I enter everything into my phone. I also enter in the things that I need to remember to do, and I actually intentionally block out time to do it. Because often I think we kind of kid ourselves a tiny bit and go like, yeah, I can do that later, kind of thing. And then we realize that actually, realistically, it takes a set amount of time. And unless you actually dedicate that time to it, it's going to either, the time's going to slip away, or it's going to end up taking you longer to do it, because you constantly have to go back and forth. And if I'll talk about time blocking next, but basically, if you can dedicate your attention to something for a set amount of time, you are more likely to finish it and lose, well, use less resources, lose less time doing it. Whereas if you kind of dip in and out and think, oh, I'll do it 5 minutes now, 5 minutes later, it's not an effective use of your time. So obviously, if you like putting things down on paper, by the way, do it. I used to make an annual planner, by the way, like a visual planner, and I would put it up on my board, and I still sometimes do that, and it's great. But sometimes I need to micromanage my time a bit better in order to make sure that I don't actually just lose it. And also because it's often the boring things that we don't want to do that we then procrastinate on. And funny enough, it's the things that we just keep pushing ahead of us. And I will say with that, mindset is a big thing, okay? Because if you have been told at some point that you're not good at a certain thing, then you probably think you're not good at that certain thing, and then you are less likely to wanting to do it because you think you might not do it great. Okay, so my thing has always been not being good with numbers. And it took me a long time to actually get out of saying that, because I was kind of affirming that to myself, you know, like, oh, I'm not good with numbers. I'm not as good with numbers as my husband, who works, you know, with, he's a very number based. I am a lot more word based, but if you keep thinking that that is the case, then it actually holds you back. So I think mindset has a very big thing to do with that as well. So take a step back and just kind of think, like, you know, just because that was a label that might have fitted you when you went to school and you didn't do well in maths or whatever, it doesn't mean that that label still sticks. Okay, so you can go beyond that. If we have got that kind of self-doubt, then that can often show up in procrastination, where we kind of push things in front of us. So then it's all about kind of, I won't say forcing yourself, but kind of look at yourself, be honest with yourself, and set the time aside. So it might be that you actually, like I said, block out the time. You have 20 minutes set aside every week to work on your accounts, so you don't have to panic this last month of January before the accounts are due. Okay, I'm looking around. People are laughing. Yeah, okay, I haven't finished mine yet. But, you know, it's that thing of actually just not leaving everything until the last minute, but actually blocking out time. And especially the boring admin things that we don't necessarily like to do, because we'd much rather focus on selecting the music for the class and working on the choreography and maybe looking at costumes and, you know, all of that. And then squirrel, you know, I get sidetracked, and I'm sure a lot of other people do as well. So time blocking. This is something that I tell a lot of people to do, because it's a way of getting over this barrier of having to do things. So basically sitting down and setting off time to allocate it to a task in order to do it. And I've got a thing over my desk, and you can't see it, but basically it says, it doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to be done. Okay. And whenever I sit down to do all the boring things that I don't like to do, then I look at that and I go like, right, okay, yes. So when it comes to time blocking, it's all about doing the task that you don't want to do first, and get it out of the way so that you can move forward. But also be realistic about the time that it takes, then do it. And if you haven't finished it, then you'll have to move on anyway. Okay, so you can't keep tweaking and perfecting it. And for any perfectionists out there, you know, that's a really hard one. Obviously, if it means that you haven't finished your tax return, well, then you'll have to come back to it later, because there are consequences. But it's about doing the really hard to do things first, and whether that's kind of putting the call in to inquire about insurance or something, and you're a bit worried what they're going to say to you or whatever, you know, like, just do it first thing in the morning, and then you don't have to worry about it. And definitely don't check your emails and do your social media first, because then you're likely to fall into a little bit of a rabbit hole. We all need to check those things as well, but not first thing in the morning, because your attention and your energy is likely to go. Okay, so do the other things first. Another way of looking at it is by basically doing a priority list. Okay, and I often recommend doing a 3-column priority list, so that because sometimes we can get a bit overwhelmed with all the things we want to do and we have to do, and I'm thinking especially wearing our different hats. So I recommend doing a 3-column priority list. So basically, write down in the first column everything that you need to do. This is your brain dump list, and in there goes everything from doing the laundry to doing the school run to doing the marketing for your business to blah, 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 everything. And then the second column, you kind of put in what you need to do, otherwise there'll be consequences for your business. And all of a sudden, things like laundry and things like that might slip out because it's not essential. Anything that's crucial for your business, otherwise there'll be consequences, but also things that will make your business, i.e. your belly dancing, grow, become better, take a step forwards. And then in the third column, be realistic on how you're going to be working on that through the time you actually have available. Whether if you're if belly dancing is sometimes you do like something you do a couple of days a week, then you might have 3 or 5 hours or something like that all across the week that you can set aside and then work on specific things. And again, it's a great way to keep you on track and avoid the whole distraction and sidetracking. So these are different ways of approaching the same thing. Sometimes we need a different tool, and other times, you know, it's not actually that it's because we're not being organized. Although I will challenge most people that sometimes it's good to actually look at how we organize ourselves, because often we can all learn and make improvements. We like to do what we've always done. But another way of maybe getting the most out of our administration and safeguard our time, make sure we're the most effective, is by streamlining our processes and by using automation. So streamlining processes it basically means having clear processes in place, and that includes policies. So if you've got customers, you need policies, right? So it can be a cancellation policy for your class. It can be when people need to have book buy for the new term, if you do refunds and all the rest of it. And if you have it all written out, and if you have a website or anywhere else where you have it on, then all you need to do is point to there every single time. You don't have to kind of mention it again. Or you have it just written out and you copy and you share. I have a thing that I do currently with my classes during COVID, where I remind all my students on a weekly basis that if they have had any symptoms within the last 10 days, blah, 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 blah. And basically, I've written it out in my phone. So I copy and paste it and I share it across, and then I tweak it. So it's not just the same thing every single week, but it saves me a lot of time. And it's kind of the really boring admin stuff that I don't want to waste my life doing, but I know it's essential that I do ask and remind my students that COVID's still here and they have to take responsibility. So obviously, if you have things like that written out, let me just say that as well. If you have it written out in Word and you then copy it across, sometimes there can be little formatting errors that creep in. Especially if you're hoping to put things, social media platforms are not too bad, but if you're trying to copy across to, let's say, a website, or maybe you're working on some marketing material, then please don't copy paste from Word, because often there's little errors, and then all of a sudden everything looks different and you go like, what have I done? So a little tip there, try and use a notepad or Pages or something like that, depending on what tool you're using. Marketing materials. Again, if you have kind of everything kind of written out or done already for you in a template, then the temptation can sometimes be to just copy things. And if we're really, really pressured for time, that is okay. But I always recommend people to kind of set up a template. So if you use whatever you use, doesn't matter, I don't know, publisher or whatever you use to kind of knock up your little flyer, whether it's for online or for going out into the world to pre-print it, then have it kind of either in a template where everything's set, and you can write out all the codes and everything, what color you use, what font size you use, and all of that. Basically what you're doing, you're creating your little brand guideline. And if you have that wherever you work, then you don't have to go back and forth all the time and trying to remember what was it that I did and it can help you to just spend that time a bit more effectively. So it's streamlining your process. Um, Automation is another really big one, and some people might get slightly scared when I mention automation, but basically on a really basic level, it just means that things you set things up and then other things happen. So you automate things, and you don't need to invest in lots of expensive software for that. It can work really on a basic level as well. So I'll give some different examples, because depending on where you are in your dance journey, different things might be relevant for you. So a really basic one can be to schedule emails. So if you've got a bit of admin time and you need to email your students later, and you're not quite sure, like, then you can either I mean, I know I can do it in Gmail, and I know of email clients can do it as well, but you can write it and then you can actually set a date for when it's sending it for you, and then you know it's done. If your email client doesn't support that, then you would just write it, save it, and draft, and then set a reminder to remember for it to send. It can also, on maybe even taking a step back, it can have something to do with, having you automate. I can't talk now. Automated replies on your email. And again, often they come with a little diary, so you can choose the time frame for when you're sending these automated replies. Make sure you check them though. Okay, so obviously they can be great for holidays, they can be great for advertising your courses. If people are inquiring and you're about to start a new course, that put information in there that points people, to your website. Some people like to put in there, I'll get back to you within 24 to 48 hours, and that's great too. It's whatever works for you and your way of working. But that's kind of I would say the entry level, because in this day and age, people expect a reply as soon as they've hit send. So it's quite nice to have an automated message going back, at least acknowledging people that you've had their message. It might also be that you have a website where people can enter their email, in either in a contact form or maybe for a newsletter or something like that. And for a long time, I was manually entering my students' email into my little. Well, at first I was not very organized with my list, and I sent everything from my email. Then I actually ended up setting up a MailChimp account. So MailChimp is an email marketing system. And then eventually I got a form on my website, and a lot of the time my students would give me an email address that I couldn't read, or I read with great difficulty, and then I couldn't enter it. And then now I'm asking my students to go and put it in themselves on my website, because it then will email them back, and they will know for sure that they have signed up. Whereas if I try and enter it, I might misread what they're saying. It obviously depends on what kind of students you have. Some people are a bit more technophobic, but sometimes we also want to obviously add that service level, especially if they're brand new. Then you don't go and say, just sign up via my website. I have, as Kay said, I have on my little form that people fill in when they come to my class, I ask them to put their email address, and I ask, would you like me to add you? And I always make sure I can read that email address. And if not, then I check back with them the following week. But other than that, generally I try and ask people to enter it themselves, and I say, in case there is an error or something like that, I'm sure that it will then get to you. And the MailChimp account is free for like a basic subscriber level. So it's quite a nice way of organizing and sending out your emails instead of having to do it through Outlook. And it's very intuitive. It's very user friendly. If you want to have something that generates an email when people are doing certain things, which is also known as automations, within MailChimp, that gets quite expensive. So I would recommend for anyone who wants to do something slightly more advanced with their email marketing to look into Mailerlite. They have, it's basically Mailer, Mailer, and then Lite. Mailerlite. They also have a free price plan, but you then have to kind of start from scratch, because it's not just transferable from MailChimp into Mailerlite. But it's free for under 500 subscribers, and it's definitely worth your time if you want to have a bit more of the whole, if this happens, then something else happens as well. Finally, social media. Don't think we can kind of leave it off the list, and I know that after me there is a lady talking about Instagram as well. So social media works if your audience is on that social media platform, and if not, then don't waste your time. Because often it's like, oh gosh, okay, now I'm on, I don't know, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and you end up spending your entire time in your entire life kind of trying to get things onto social media. Do it if your audience is on there. If not, then don't waste don't waste your time. Social media scheduling is very easy in this day and age as well. So if you want to, let's say, promote your new course or something like that, then you can basically plan in your social media by sitting it down, putting it into a planner, and it all goes out for you during the week. Facebook has a thing now that if you pair your Facebook account with your Instagram account, that you can kind of you can send it out on both. As the Instagram lady will probably tell you, it's very important that the language is different because they are different platforms. Yeah, I'll leave that to her. So there's other ways of doing it. So in Facebook, there is something called the Facebook Business Suite that you can kind of use, or if you have a group for your class, for example, in groups you can schedule as well, because if you write a little post, it gets a little schedule thing at the top. The only thing you can't do it on your own personal feed. But that's also where you want to put all the fun stuff. So that's where you want people to kind of have a look behind the scenes anyway. Otherwise, there's lots of platforms out there that offer free accounts, and you can do a certain amount of things, which for most people probably is going to be absolutely enough for what you want. But platforms such as Hootsuite, Later, or Buffer, they all do the same thing. I have played around with all of them. I don't like any of them, but it depends on you as a person, okay? And I will say, I think especially Hootsuite and Later, that it's not actually needed. If you are on Facebook and that's your medium, you use the business suite, and that will do a lot of it for you. And that's another way of doing the whole automation thing. Using your time so that you're blocking it out. You're sitting down, right? I've got two hours now. I know I've got a beginner's class starting. I want to put in my marketing. You take the same message, you rewrite it basically 5 times, or you rewrite it twice and you add different pictures to it, so that it's not the same thing that's going out. And then you kind of all add it in to go out at different times. That's kind of an easy way of doing it. And the same thing if you want to, like I said, do any of your admin, try and get it in those time blocks so that you don't have to kind of do a bit now and a bit later, because it takes our brains a certain amount of time and energy to kind of readjust to work on something. And finally, find the solution that fits you, because none of this will fit everyone. We all have to tweak, and we all have to find ways of doing it better. And that's kind of what I have. And I have not kept a look in the chat at all. So if there are any questions.
There's just one from Yala saying, with the MailChimp, it's a really small number of people who actually open the emails. So is it even worth doing, I suppose?
It kind of depends. So it depends it depends on the open rate. Okay, so I think an open rate between 30 and 40% is quite good. Although if you've got a really dedicated list of students, you'd expect it to be much higher than that. What I normally say to my students is that they have to, if they sign up, they have to make sure that they add my email to their whitelist or their friends list, because otherwise what often happens is it ends up straight in spam and people don't see it. A lot of mailboxes now also have folders that are called promotions. So anything that is recognized as a bit of a mass email will automatically go into promotions. So it might be that people don't actually see it. That's another thing. So it's finding out, obviously, if it's the right way to communicate. I communicate with my students on many different platforms and many different levels. So I've got a general mailing list, which I use for anyone who's interested, but my students are on there as well. And sometimes well, you can go in, you can see who opens them, which is really interesting because it's not always the people you expect. And then I have different groups for my classes. So I've got not many of my students are not on Facebook, but I still got a Facebook group for some those that are. And then I've also got an what's it called, WhatsApp for my classes. And I think I've only had one student ever who was not confident on WhatsApp, but even she got her head around it. And it's a good way for messages and for keeping on there. And I found that that's almost the better way to get quick messages to my class students. And I introduced that during COVID because I never quite knew whether I had to, what if I had to cancel last minute? What if I got COVID? What if, yeah, so I needed a means of communicating really, really quickly. So I've introduced different levels of communicating with my students.
Yeah, I think I have the Facebook group, but that relies on them engaging with you. And so I think the WhatsApp group is a really good idea because you can keep that sort of current. So it's just people that are at your classes currently. I haven't done that yet. So yeah, thank you.
It does mean that you have to put in a bit of time, obviously, at the beginning of every term. And at one point, I also had to say in one of my groups that, can we only discuss class-related things, please? Because it was getting a bit out of hand. Okay, some of the things was kind of fun, and some of it was a bit, especially when I introduced it actually just a general one just before COVID hit, and very quickly that one became a bit of just COVID jokes, and it was just a bit okay, all right. I had to police that a tiny bit. But yeah, it's a quick way of getting messages to students. But like you say, it depends on your students, and it depends on where your classes are, because if your class setting is where it's maybe managed a bit like K's in Dance City, it might be slightly different. I don't know. Whereas if you've got one in a church hall, the ownership is completely on you to give any information about the venue, maybe last minute, or any information about you. So I definitely recommend that one. But yeah, you'll have to police it, and you have to make sure you take people in and out if they don't come to term or to class.
Fantastic. I'm going to take you off spotlight, Dorte. And does anybody have any more quick questions? Lots of information there, though, lots of ideas to take away and use. And sometimes I have to do these things bit by bit, because if I'm given too much all at once, I'm like, too much information. So great. Thank you, Dorte. All right, I'm going to stop the